As trade rumors continue to escalate for the Toronto Maple Leafs, a name that has been brought up in trade talks is Timothy Liljegren. Fans want to see him traded, the front office might want to see him traded, and a lot of potential trades have been floating around. So I'm going to break all those down and discuss what the Leafs could potentially get in exchange for the defenseman. But before we do, quick reminder, hit the subscribe button. If you're a part of the 80% who aren't subscribed, it would mean the world to Darius and I if you could do that, as we're on the road to 10,000 and less than 200 subscribers away. So make sure to do that. But Darius, a lot to get into today. More trade talks, obviously, because the Toronto Maple Leafs have been heavily involved over the past couple of weeks in the rumor mill regarding trades, but all the talks have been on Mitch Marner, and today we're going to discuss someone different, and that is Timothy Liljegren. Now, there's a chance that Timothy Liljegren gets brought up in these trade talks with Mitch Marner anyways, combined in a package, but we're kind of going to focus on just the kind of player that Timothy Liljegren has been and what potential trades could go through, and we do have one target in mind that a trade could work out for them. But Darius, you can see this here. This is from Matthew's fan. He says, if the Leafs are considering trading Timothy Liljegren, Morgan Frost is someone I'd like them to target. He has enough raw skill to become a fine complementary piece and reach point per game status, especially if paired with Marner or Nylander. We're getting some more reports or rumors at this point regarding Liljegren. But what are your thoughts on a potential Timothy Liljegren trade? For potentially Morgan Frost in general, or just thoughts on that at all?
Yeah, there's nothing really official or cemented with this, but people have been bringing it up that the Leafs might look to move on from these players. And honestly, I think it might be, and when I say players, there have been trade rumors around Liljegren and Jarnkrok, more notably, the last couple of days. So I think the Leafs could move on at least from Liljegren. We know what we kind of have in him at this point. We've talked about it ad nauseum a little bit. And, we know exactly what he is. I think he's reached his ceiling. We've seen flashes, but at the end of the day, consistently, we're not getting exactly what we thought we were going to get out of Liljegren. So Morgan Frost would be an interesting trade chip. He was scratched a lot in Philly this year, healthy scratched. Maybe it's just not a good fit with Torts and his style of play. I think he can really help the Leafs. He grew up here. His dad used to be the PA announcer of the Toronto Maple Leafs, so I'm sure he would want to be a Leaf as well. And Liljegren would be a great piece going the other way for Philly as well. And the Leafs are going to look at some other options in terms of right shot defensemen through free agency this summer. So I wonder if they qualify Timothy Liljegren, because again, he is an RFA too. A lot of people are forgetting about that. So qualify him and then maybe move him after that. I think that's something the Leafs are going to look into. And Morgan Frost, good depth option, good scoring option as well. Could look good on a third line because the Leafs are going to look very different next year.
Yeah, and Liljegren's a pending RFA, so we've presumed that they'll probably qualify him just to retain the asset and then maybe trade him in the future. And I think that other teams probably view Liljegren a bit higher than the Leafs do at this point, because we've seen that, albeit in Sheldon Keefe's system, he hasn't performed to the extent that we were hoping he would be able to. So maybe if a change of scenery could work very well for him. And a couple of screenshots here. We're going to get back to this in a little bit, specifically regarding Liljegren getting leveled there. But you look at Morgan Frost, and Darius, again, we know from reports, from even what Brad Treliving said, that the Leafs want to shake up their defensive core group. And if you're doing that by trading Timothy Liljegren, who's kind of, I wouldn't say he's the odd man out at this point because they haven't made any additions, but he is probably going to end up being the odd man out. Morgan Frost would be an absolutely stellar target to go after. Obviously, he's not going to be putting up a point per game in the current system, but maybe with Craig Berube, pairing him with William Nylander, like there's a lot of potential there for Morgan Frost to excel. But then you also talk about how Timothy Liljegren, in absence of Morgan Rielly, did perform a lot better. So maybe that's something that the Leafs are looking at. But Morgan Frost is a player, I think it makes sense for both sides at this point, especially for a Flyers team that could use Timothy Liljegren. And if you're looking at it from a Flyers perspective, like I said, without Morgan Rielly, he played very well, and if he gets the opportunity in Philly, it could be mutually beneficial for both sides here. And I think it just makes a lot of sense, and it also helps the Leafs' depth center position.
Yeah, and I think that's something they have to shore up pretty quickly here. And they could do it through free agency too, but they could do it through this trade as well. And like you said, I think it kind of works for both teams if you look at it. And with the Leafs and Timothy Liljegren, we know what we have with this player. And maybe, he's shown flashes. I've said that. He's shown in moments that he can come up big. But again, these are regular season games. As we've seen in the playoffs, he was, I don't want to use the word liability, but they'd rather play Justin Hall over him sometimes when they had Justin Hall. And then most recently this year, he was getting banged up in the playoffs. So they have to look for probably a different option at that position. And maybe he can succeed on a different team in a different role, but maybe, on this Leafs team in the current role that he's in. I think we've seen just about everything we're going to see out of him. So maybe it is time to move on from that player because you're going to, have some additions on the back end this year through free agency anyway. And if you can get a good player like Morgan Frost for your third line, fourth line, I think it's a pretty interesting thing to look at. I'm not saying it's going to happen. There aren't really any official reports about it, but I think things are going to start to heat up moving into the draft and free agency, of course.
Yeah, especially with the Leafs' supposed willingness to want to shake things up or be willing to shake things up. And he's almost like the defense version of Nick Robertson in the sense that the player itself has the potential to be good, but with the Leaf system, specifically Sheldon Keefe, again, the big difference here is that Craig Berube is now the coach, so it might change their mind on things. But I think even if you're thinking of it from Liljegren's perspective, he probably might want a shakeup of teams, whether that's with the Philadelphia Flyers or whatnot. But Morgan Frost, and we'll get into a potential trade in a second, will be a great asset. But again, you look at Timothy Liljegren, this was supposed to be not necessarily his breakout year, but I think most Leafs fans would agree we're expecting some sort of jump, or especially maybe in the playoffs, especially. But the issue was he struggled a little bit. Now, again, when Morgan Rielly was gone, he did a lot better. But Darius, I think it might be, he's only 25 years old. Like, it seems like we're talking about him like he's an older player. I just think a change of scenery would be good for him. But let's get into this potential trade here before we wrap up. And this one's very interesting. Leave in the comment section if you would do this trade. Now, again, you're kind of pairing a bunch of different things here. Darius, what are your thoughts on this? Now, this would change up the core a lot. Now, this is a Calle Jarnkrok focused trade. Well, obviously, they're kind of pairing those two with Liljegren as well. But this one's interesting. I wanted to throw out here before we end. Darius, a lot going on in this one. And this is also assuming you re-sign Max Domi. So a lot of assumptions in this, but it's a fun exercise to go over. But again, it's Logan Cooley, Lawson Krause, and a 2025 second for Marner to the Utah. They don't obviously have a team name yet. And Calle Jarnkrok. Interesting. You look at the lines that this gives, definitely would be a major shakeup to a lot of different areas. And yeah, you could even maybe replace Liljegren with Jarnkrok if you want to do that for the exercise for the sake of this, given the fact that Marner's been kind of linked with Timothy Liljegren in a lot of these mock trades. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, fun little proposal here. And I don't know. Again, it's assuming you re-sign Domi and sign DeBrusque, which we talked about a couple of days ago, and assuming those things. And obviously, Logan Cooley would be a great get for the Leafs if they're, looking to trade Mitch Marner to Utah, if that ends up being a thing or even a conversation. But, Lawson Krause, not a huge fan of that. Coming back the other way, the second round pick is great. I think you need a first round pick for Mitch Marner. That's just my thoughts on it. So fun little trade proposal there, but I'm not sure it looks exactly like that. I think it's going to look a little different if it is for Mitch Marner, although Logan Cooley would be a great get for the Leafs. And most interesting thing out of that too is Jarnkrok. There have been some rumblings on Jarnkrok. Could he be on the way out too? Other teams looking at him. I think as Leaf fans too, we should even look at David Kampf. Now that Sheldon Keefe signed in in New Jersey with the Devils, I wonder if that's a player they look at. Sheldon Keefe loved David Kampf, and David Kampf makes way too much money for what he does on the Leafs. So I wonder if there's a world where the Leafs can kind of look to offset that contract as well. So there's going to be some movement. There's going to be some movement with current Leafs. Obviously, they're going to make a lot of moves in free agency and make room for people in free agency through trade. So it's going to be a fun summer.
Very, very fun summer, and we're going to be covered all the way through. A lot of trade rumors going down. Let us know what your thoughts are on a Morgan Frost or Timothy Liljegren swap. Obviously, maybe some picks going the other way, and leave your potential trade proposal down in the comment section below. But that'll wrap it up. Thank you guys for watching. Make sure to hit the subscribe button. We're on the road to 10,000, and we will see you soon.